If you've been using AI tools and you're still not sure if they're actually saving you time, or if you're doing the same work twice in maybe a different order, this one's for you. Welcome to the Building Thinkers podcast. I'm Tracy Clark, and today we're digging into something that I think a lot of us are feeling, but maybe haven't been able to name yet, which is this idea that AI has made it really fast to start lots of things, but somehow the work itself doesn't always feel easier. And my guest today has a really compelling take on why that is. He's a principal technologist and product-focused engineer who's spent his career designing and shipping complex systems end to end. And he also writes like a philosopher about what's uniquely human and what's uniquely machine and how this can inform the future of work. And one of the things I love about his work is he's not afraid to say that most of us, himself included, have been getting this wrong. Not because the tools aren't powerful, but because we keep trying to bolt them on to the way that we already work, instead of pausing, stepping back, and asking the harder questions about what work should actually look like now. I can't wait for this conversation. We almost had a whole podcast conversation before we started recording. I'm so delighted to be joined today by
Max Kirchoff. And by the way, Tracy, that is the best intro ever. Can I just have you join every call I'm ever on with me, or get a recording of that?
Max, thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited. All right, let's kick off with, so it's the Building Thinkers podcast, Max. And I want to ask you first, what is it that you build, and a little bit of your backstory, how you got there to being philosopher technologist.
Oh, it's funny. As soon as you said, what is it you build? I immediately thought of my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old. Oh. So maybe I'll answer that question in a couple ways. So I am building a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old on a regular basis with my partner. But in my career, I'm building all kinds of different software systems. Most recently, I've been working with a product called Ginkgo, where we're building AI-powered, AI-native aid for parents of kids and adolescents. I've also worked on fraud prevention and some other sort of AI automated tools right now that I can't talk about necessarily too publicly, but they're pretty cool. And then on the other side of that, in the sort of philosophical realm, I've been writing a bunch just in my Substack Human of the Loop, where I'm a person who's in the loop. There's this term, human in the loop, that people might be aware of. It's like when you're working with a data science model, or some sort of AI model, machine learning model as the human part, like you're doing some activity inside of there, you're informing it or training it. That's what I do a lot of the time. So it's like me reflecting both from being inside of that, but as well as like being outside of it and thinking about it and how it works.
Max, it's so awesome. I do think a lot of listeners have maybe heard the idea of human in the loop. I think a lot of people are wrestling with just they're experimenting with AI. They're using it in different ways. Some people have gone really deep. Some people are just beginning and trying to understand the difference between all the different tools and models. But I want to, I'm going to go right into reading to you. I love to do this. I'm going to read to you something that you wrote, which is always fun. So, and we'll put the link to this in the episode description, but this was on your Substack, Human of the Loop. In this section, the header is How I Found My Way Out. I'd been watching this pattern for the last 3 years, first in software engineering, then spreading across all kinds of knowledge work. Teams bolt on AI to their existing rhythm. Velocity appears to spike, and something quietly starts to break. I went through this exact experience myself. This is still Max talking. For months, I toyed with Cursor, Claude, and other coding AI tools. I would open them up, give them a basic prompt, and expectantly wait for it to code faster and better than me. I would then spend roughly the time it would take me to write that same code, reviewing what it did. If it wasn't perfect, I would get frustrated, throw up my hands, and say, AI can't code. Eventually, I realized I was the problem. And what unstuck me wasn't some new AI-specific insight, but an old one from Andy Grove, written in 1983. Grove's high output management, we'll put the link in the description, makes a distinction I'd always applied in my own leadership. The job isn't to attend every meeting. It's to read the indicators that tell you whether the system is healthy. Don't manage activity, manage output and signals. I use this method as an engineering leader. You don't review every line of code. You design the systems so you can tell when something's gone wrong. You trust the architecture and instrument measurements for detecting drift, not for visibility in every decision. That's good, Max. Have you ever had your own words read to you? Was that fun?
No, and you can tell my I don't know, I didn't know I had a healthy ego, but that felt more good than cringe. So
It's so good. Okay, Max, I think in that you gave us something we're wrestling with. You brought your own practical example to it, and so we can see ourselves in it. Can you
yeah.
unpack that a little bit for us? Like what is that aha? Take us through that a little bit more.
That was probably over the course of 6 months to almost 9 months, a year maybe, where I would play with these tools. I had so many other things going on that I was like, I just don't have time. I don't have time to get into this, whatever. What finally broke it is I was faced with the idea that like, oh, I have to get some impossible things done by an impossible deadline. And a good friend of mine, Sam Keen, who he writes for software engineering, all about AI enablement. I was seeing him write more and more about how effective things had become. And I was like, okay, this expert really thinks that these tools are effective. And this is like he is not a hype guy. It is like a very analytical engineer who was very skeptical of this stuff. And he is saying it's working. So I'm like, okay, it is working. It's not working for me though. So like, what's the problem? Where is the disconnect there?
Yeah.
And that's when I really had the moment to zoom out. I sort of experience things more intuitively. I've learned to trust that intuition of mine and not, blindly go out and say, oh, things are broken because I feel like they're broken. But for me, it's a chance to take a look at it and be like critical of it. And that's really what happened there. Right. And so I had some impossible things I had to get done. I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. I need to figure out how to get AI to work for me. And I'm basically going to bet on I can get this working. And if I can't, then this whole thing's going to fall apart, and that's okay. I'll figure out what to do next. But that was my aha moment, was literally faced with what was impossible, seeing that this can be successful, and then saying like, I need to figure out how I can make it successful for me.
It's so powerful, Max. You give another example of somebody who was writing like a newsletter and got frustrated that the newsletter was taking longer once she was working with AI on it and coming back. I think a lot of people have had that like similar experience. So let's talk to the listener that's there. Like
Yeah.
they know what the tools are generally and they are playing, and maybe they have like a project in Claude at this point and they figured a little bit out there. But like, what would you say to people? We have a lot of entrepreneurs, or a lot of people who are entrepreneurs within their organizations. They're embedded.
Yeah.
They might have company models, enterprise models of the tools. But I don't find that a lot of the people in my network and the listeners necessarily have had a ton of like explicit training on this part, like how to take their existing systems and their ways of work and to your point, like pause and rethink. So where would you tell people to start with any of that?
It's funny, what I was thinking about right then when you're asking is one of the cautions I want to give to folks, which is AI LLMs specifically, the things that we're using, Claude, ChatGPT, even Perplexity, search engine based stuff. A lot of this is still pretty new. It's advancing really fast, but it's still pretty new. And the thing I want to start with that's a caution is there are lots of products that say that they're AI native, that are built on top of these models to like do the thing for you. Be wary of these tools, because we're not at a point of evolution where there can be that many tools that do the whole workflow for you. So I'm sure there's probably a number of tools out there in the newsletter example, right? Let's say you need to have a newsletter as a part of your company. You're starting a company or you started one. There's a newsletter you need to fill out. I guarantee you there's tools out there that say, we're going to do it all for you end to end. They probably can't. Maybe there's some exceptions in there. It's going to be really hard for you to know until you've spent a bunch of money and time and maybe, ruined a bunch of your opportunity. So the thing that I would say to that first question is like, really go back to those base models and like, look at things like Claude. I don't love OpenAI for lots of reasons, but ChatGPT still is pretty powerful for some things. Look at Perplexity. There's some other tools out there too, but try to work with those tools first. And honestly, I guess my little trick that I would say is like, open Claude. Let's say you're using Claude, and let's say you can use Claude Cowork or even Claude Chat, but Cowork's better for something like this. And go in and say, hey, here are the like processes that I'm doing on a given day as an entrepreneur in my company. Which of these could I potentially build an AI workflow around or an AI system around? Just start there and literally ask these models. They have great data. They understand their own capabilities pretty well. And you can literally just start there and start with that brainstorming, start with that. Do you need to trust everything it tells you? No. Similar to Andy Grove's high output management, it's like, try to design the system, look for the indicators though. Ask it, hey, are you correct on this? Can you verify what you said? But go to that first. So on the newsletter writing workflow, it's like literally go to Claude and ask Claude, hey, what's the best way for me to implement an AI driven, newsletter workflow here? And it's going to come up with some ideas and work with it. Like that's the whole thing, is you need to spend that time up front designing what you need and what you want in those outputs. That real problem, like you said, when you walk up to it and you say, okay, here's my workflow. I do A, I do B, I do C. Can you just do C for me? It's not going to work very well.
So Max, one of the things, okay, I want to dig into the idea of trust.
Yeah.
So when you're building a human relationship, trust is built over time. It's built in many ways. And so you spend time together, you see how each other interacts. You maybe go, as trust deepens, through hard things together, like joyful things, all of that. What strikes me about the AI model is what you just described is spending more time with it, seeing how it works. Do you see, like, we can be philosophers again for a moment. Do you see a connection there to how you build that trust? Not saying that it's reciprocal in the same way, but are some of the ways you get there similar to human relationship?
I have a couple modes of thinking here, I think. As an engineer, as a software engineer, I would say no. And the reason why is because building trust with an LLM is a mistake because it doesn't have memory the same way you do. It doesn't experience things the same way you do. It doesn't have a relationship that has high stakes. Whether or not you cancel your subscription, it sort of doesn't really care about that, right? It's designed to be engaging and appear to build trust with you. But the reality is, I mean, imagine a human relationship that was $20 a month and you could just cancel at any time, right? Like you're not going to have a lot of trust in that relationship.
Right.
And so you design, as an engineer anyway, you design around no trust being there. And that's like you trusting the system, going back to that quote.
Yeah.
Right? It's around you trusting the architecture and the design of your relationship. And so, like I said, when you go to the LLM and you start asking it questions, what you're doing is you're crafting sort of an ecosystem that it can operate in for that conversation. You don't know that, as you're interacting with it. Most people don't know that, I think, right?
Yeah.
When you hear folks talk about context, and I don't want to get too complicated, but when I say context to a regular person, they think I mean knowing about what's going on around you. In LLMs, context is a specific technical thing, which is that same thing. It is like all of the information that the LLM has available to it. And as you craft that context with it, you can start to trust the architecture, the design that you're putting into it, or not trust it. Because things that you say and that conversation, the way it goes, can really change what it's going to do in that situation. And I think that that's an important distinction because in a human relationship, part of the trust is, that I see you as an individual human being, and I can sort of imagine that you experience the world in a similar way, maybe not the same, but a similar way, and that you just know things that every person knows, and like what it's like to smell baking bread, what it's like to hear a child cry, right? And LLMs don't have that. We don't have a basic understanding of each other's experience.
So it strikes me that it's maybe a bit of like what I'm really talking about is one side of trust.
Yeah.
Not reciprocal. So my new question is, when can you trust your context engineering, your setting up of the model like that? This is a very relevant, like real question I'm asking, because I think in my own work with the tools and in places where I am part of the context engineering team, from the learning design side and then watching the output and watching when it drifts and when it drifts, when you have nailed it enough to do what you're describing there, which is start to look at those signals instead of every line of output.
You sort of embedded the answer there, right? And which is you need to have like indicators and monitors on those outputs to understand when things are changing in a substantial way. And that really means you thinking critically and deeply about like your desired outputs and what that effect is. And so in that article that I wrote, right, on the newsletter part, as you read, is I talk a little bit about like, okay, there needs to be some monitor of quality, of the output of quality of your newsletters. Because if the quality starts to change over time, then maybe you're not going to notice it one at a time, but you're going to have to see it at like a 6-month level oh, your article used to include 3 really informative insights and like 2 calls to action. And now it's just like bantering about what's happening in the last week or something, like you need to have that kind of a quality output. You need to know what makes your newsletter great.
Yeah, like why are you doing it to begin with? Because there's lots of noise out there.
Totally, right? And then you need to be watching on the newsletter side, right? You need to be watching your engagement from your end users. Like, is it staying the same? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Are the reasons for that? That's like the sort of output level. And in that way, it's funny, LLMs are really similar to managing a team or an organization, where it's like you don't know what's happening inside of here. So you just have to look at those monitors, those alerts and those indicators. But like I said, that's a really useful way to think about it too, because when you have that first conversation, you want to say, here's the things I want, right? Like, here are these 5 outputs and how I want to impact them. We need to design this system around those outputs.
Can you talk to us more about how you've rethought work and how we can get ourselves kind of out of that mindset, no matter what our different, day-to-day work is? How do we pull back and start to reimagine the process itself with the tools that we have?
There's a framework that I try to sort of pitch, and there's lots of ways to think about this, but I'll use mine as maybe like a napkin framework, and folks can think about their own way of working.
Mhm.
But the way I really see it, and I'm a systems thinker, which is, I can't help it. I go outside and, I see like the way streets work and the way the sidewalk is. And I think about like the infrastructure that gets it there and like how it exists. It's just how I am. I don't know why. But because of that, this informs a lot of the way I see this work. And so there's really 4 layers that I think about, which is task, which is, the one we're talking about. And that's where most people get hung up on AI is you have these single things that you do. And you're like, how do I plug AI into this single thing? Whether that's like, I need to fix bugs, so I need to write some code. Okay, I'm going to just have it write this code about this bug or this one little idea. Or you're going to say, oh, can you put together an email for me that, for my newsletter? Your tasks are like a part of some workflow that you're doing, right? So when I'm fixing the bug, it's actually me, as a software engineer going in, either a customer told us that something's not working, or I saw that it's not working. And then I have to do an analysis of why it's not working. Mm-hmm. Then I have to go work with some people to figure out how it was supposed to be working. Then I need to come in and like capture, okay, here's what it should be doing. Here's what it's actually doing. Then I write code. Then I see if there's some way I can prevent a similar kind of problem from ever happening. It's this bigger workflow of tasks. And then in the writing, the newsletter one, an example for folks might be, instead of writing the email, it's like, oh, I researched these 5 topics that happened in this last week in the related field. I figure out if any of them align with, my whole objective of what I'm doing and writing a newsletter for. Then I write my unique insight on those 5 things, or what are we ever end up with 3 things. And then I have a call to action, right? And that's like a workflow of developing your newsletter.
It's kind of like the formula of the task or an algorithm for the task. Like
it's how you orchestrate your tasks
to
get something done. Because in most cases, a single task isn't. It's like doing a thing, but it's not achieving a goal, let's say. The next layer is systems. And systems in my mind are, a way of sort of organizing those workflows. Or in a business, you would see these as organizing divisions. Mm-hmm. Like you have your finance division, you have your engineering division. There's a system, the system of how they work together and the tools they're using. And there's all these workflows inside of that, right? And the systems are driven on like an overarching goal. The writing, your weekly newsletter, let's say, is a workflow that you do inside of your go-to-market, which is like how you obtain new customers and how you get more engagement from prospects, right? And then the next level above system is organization, which is like the company or the business or the organization you work with, whatever that is. And it's like at the overarching thing, it's like, is this thing getting bigger and better and improving? Is it getting worse? At an aggregate level. In business terms, we would say, right, like, is your profit growing? Is your customer base growing? Is it shrinking? How are you doing in profitability? Like, these measures get farther and farther away from each task. And so to go back to that, again, most people try to go to task level with AI. And my whole argument, and the thing that I've observed, is like, you have to go workflow and above, I think. And that's really where you can empower sort of the usage of AI.
When you're zooming out to that systems level, I'm curious if there's anything that you do or anything you've seen be really effective to help you get unhooked from the
Yeah.
current system. That's what I'm going to say. Like
Yeah.
we're so
Totally.
stuck in like this is the way. I'll just use learning experience design for a second. There's so many models and there's all sorts of things. And I've always been a little bit unhooked from the models because I have such different projects that require different things. I'm not going to sit there and use the same framework every time, but they're tools in my tool belt and I know them and I have expertise, but I also can be like, there might be a totally different way to do this. And I like to draw and sketch out those things or go sit in nature. And sometimes that's where there's inspiration. So I'm curious for you when you're zooming
Yeah.
out to that systems level, because I think people, to your point earlier of like, we're so busy, we just have to do the next thing. We don't have deep time to even explore with the tools. Well, we have even less time to pause and rethink the system, but maybe it's we have to go slow to go fast. And
Yeah.
that could shift the whole thing. So I'm curious about this idea of getting unhooked.
I don't know if it's my philosophy background or just how my brain works or something. I'm a first principles person. And for folks who don't know what first principles is, it's like, how do you get down to where there aren't any more assumptions? And I can give an example of that, which is when you say, go write a newsletter. Oh, this isn't working. Why isn't it working?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I don't know. Let me zoom out. Like, okay, I zoomed out. What else could I be doing differently? Like, oh, well, I assumed I could just do this. As soon as you start making assumptions and our systems and everything that we do in our lives, like there's all kinds of assumptions that we're making all the time. And it's totally like reasonable. You should not walk around questioning assumptions constantly.
Yeah.
Like your car is parked in your driveway. You do not need to have a camera pointed at it, looking at it all the time just to know that it's there, right? But that is an assumption that it's going to be there when you go back, right? You're inferring things. And when we construct these like workflows, the way we go about our life, the way we do business, we construct things, we build them, we believe we have quality controls, and then we just assume that they're working, right? And we assume that things will continue to work, and we assume that we can replace a tool or something with AI. You have to go back to first principles, though, is you have to ask like, okay, why are we doing it this way? Can we do it another way? Like, what is the actual outcome we're targeting? What are the other ways that we could be doing it? And so that's how I break out of it, is like really trying to find my own assumptions. And so in my own example, right, I was trying to approve every edit and every line of code that the LLM made and then expecting perfection. I was like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I need to look at every line of code? I should actually just see if what it did worked first. And then if what it did worked and it has some quality control in place, why does it matter that I look at every line of code? It doesn't. And so going back right to this newsletter example, it's like if you're seeing the quality of the newsletter do fine and you're seeing engagement go up, do you even need to be reading your own newsletter? I don't know.
Okay, I could go two directions here. One, I think one of the reasons why we wrestle with that, even like my own feeling that I had it, I was thinking about that. I think what happens to us is we're like, Max, are we needed? Like, are we needed? Like when our identity is connected, maybe even for some of us, arguably too much into our work, and we see a tool that can do the thing that we thought was the thing that we did, is a piece of this that's hard for us, not just the like figuring out where it works and does it work. Is it easier for us to be like, oh, okay, AI can't code, than question, wow, I have a computer science degree and I did this and I learned, like, what do I do now? Like, how do you think about this piece of where humans are now needed?
Yeah. Let me take you on a software journey.
Yes, let's go.
So in software engineering, and I get flack for this probably sometimes, but there are a number of folks who are writing, think pieces on how the craft of software engineering is dead. Because exactly what you just said, right? Yeah. If we're not writing every line of code, then what are we doing exactly? And the quality is going to go out the door for X, Y, and Z reason, and et cetera, et cetera. So many years ago, my grandmother actually was a software engineer on the space station and the space shuttle, which was pretty cool. Yeah. I have a bunch of her old books around here somewhere that are incredibly irrelevant now. If I open one of those books that was integral to her work on the space shuttle and the space station, almost nothing that they talk about in there is applicable. And it's not because it's not important or it wasn't right at the time or it wasn't fundamentally in the right direction. It's because the layer of abstraction that we use now in software engineering is just so different than it was then. So she was using punch cards, and they were, basically like machine language is what I'll try. I'm going to try and not get too technical so I
No,
don't
it's
lose
okay.
folks.
It's okay. We have some technical friends. It's fine.
Yeah. But I'll just say, like, when they were doing programming, then you were basically telling the machine bits, on and off switches. You were like putting on and off switches in different places so that it could do the thing it was doing, right? Compilers and compiled languages, like programming languages, when those became popular, and there were some early ones, around at that time that became more popular, you didn't have to do the on-off switches anymore. You could actually write what sort of looked like English. You could say, execute this, go to this next line, execute that, go to this line. And underneath that, the compiler was turning that into the on and off switches for you. And so the craft of those punch cards and those on off switches was lost. It was now in a different layer, right? And we call that an abstraction layer. And so like that compiler made it so that my grandmother, and then my father actually was also a software engineer in aerospace, they could write what looked like human language in a way, and it would compile down to machine language so the machine could run it. And yeah, so that abstraction layer, this is continuing to happen. So nowadays we are like 3-4 abstraction layers away from machine language, like depending on what you're working in. And the difference with AI, the reason why I think it makes some people anxious, is those are abstractions of what you might call deterministic. So if I write, execute this, that gets compiled the same way through all those layers to the same on and off switches. The difference now with AI is it's probabilistic, which means that if I say, hey, AI, write this, write some code to do a thing, it's not going to come up with the same answer twice. It's going to have slight variations, but the end goal is still going to be accomplished if it did its job right, which it's going to do most of the time. And so going back to reel us back into your question, right? We're still needed. We're still needed to design these things to get the right outcomes. We're still needed to craft. It's just the level that we're crafting at is changing. And figuring out how to adapt to that level to operate this new tool is critical. And I see this in software, and this is going to happen everywhere else, but it's happening in software more than ever. Knowing how to craft these tools is going to be like a career differentiator for people. And I'm watching engineers actively deny using AI, which maybe for moral reasons, maybe for other reasons. I understand that. But what I don't think they realize is like they're not going to have a career in the future if they can't adapt to what's happening.
You helped give me language for a couple things. I really like this idea of the layer of abstraction. I think that's really helpful to be able to consider the ways in which we're working, because, in all these think pieces, you hear all the other examples. I think that nailed it in such a different way, instead of comparing it to like the internet or, the printing press or these other like examples that are out there. And also, we've had several conversations on some of the projects I'm working on about what you spoke to of deterministic versus probabilistic. And I do think that's one of the differentiators here, is we have to look at it in a different way when it feels almost like our hands are no longer on the wheel, when we're like, wait, but I told you to do this and I see that. And there's a little bit of like coming to terms with and understanding why it did that. And maybe it is better, to your point, but when the drift that we maybe see there is not, I think that's when it takes us back into like the quality control that you described. And at least in some of the things that I've seen recently, while it's drastically improving, there's still work to be done there. That's part of where we're needed. And then this zooming out as well. Do you have thought about that?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I think a good way for people to maybe anchor some of the thinking around probabilistic versus deterministic. And this is why, one of my other articles that we talked about on leadership, it's very funny because people get really anxious about this separation of deterministic versus probabilistic. And people experience this maybe even without that language, right? Of like, well, I say something to it and it comes up with something totally different. There is another place we see this, which is in leading teams. And like, people are not deterministic. I can't walk outside and say, give somebody a semi-complex task like, oh, hey, can you put a fence up? And then just know that it's going to be exactly what I asked for and what I expected, right? And that's okay. But it's cool because that means we have that frame of reference of like leading people, managing people has like, there's stuff that we're doing there that's actually really similar to working with AI, which is how do we set up the AI for success? How do we give a team the right sort of expectations and outcomes, it's the same kind of thing you want to do for an AI.
Okay, I want to talk more about leadership now. And I know that you write about a lot of this in your work and in your experience. If you're speaking now to a leader who's listening, where would you help them in some of these conversations when you know there's some anxiety for teams around? I mean, we again read every day about layoffs and AI is coming for your job, and we've unpacked a lot of that, right? But the reality is things are shifting. And so, what would be your advice to leaders right now that are helping teams engage with these tools? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say be patient with them. Like there's an adoption curves are already hard as it is, right? Like adopting new tools, adopting new skills is already hard. I think with AI, it's very hard because it operates very differently than we expected, as we were just talking about, right? And so be a little patient. I think the mistake of we need to AI everything at whatever cost is a big one that I keep seeing. And are some of those companies going to be successful? Totally, but that's not going to be because they did AI everything at all costs. It's going to be because they have smart people working inside and got lucky. I think literally in a business, it comes from leadership, like how you're going to enable AI. And you need to really talk to your teams and get to that system level of thinking, an organizational level of thinking, of like, and giving them the freedom to talk about their anxiety, but also like giving them time and space to figure out like, how can we effectively apply AI here? Not how can we replace you with AI or replace what you're doing with AI. And the most effective thing I've seen for non-software folks for other functions is getting them like in Lovable or with Claude or something and say like, can you just go like build some apps to do things that you do and see if you, and just like let you do it. Let you become more productive, right?
Mhm.
If you're a business leader and you're looking at AI saying, how does this make us more efficient and profitable? You're not seeing AI for its growth potential. And you're going to make some mistakes and lay off some people you needed probably.
Mm. Ooh, I'd love to dig more into this. How might we invest in the humans so that they're ready for the right work?
One of the big things is education,
Mhm.
making education available. And there's free stuff even. But as a leader, I think you need to really be making it clear to your employees, your colleagues, that they should be taking time to like educate themselves during work on the clock, because it's an investment in like what you're going to get out of them as people. And if you're running a business where you're not investing in any education anyway, then I'm probably speaking to deaf ears right now. But you should definitely be doing that around AI. That's step one, I would say. Step two, and these are, I want to be really clear. I'm the type of leader, I over index probably, but I think in a good way, on autonomy and transparency.
Mhm.
And like those are critical, I think, to really bringing AI into your workflows in your business, because you need to be able to give people some room to fail and like have some failure to launch. You need to let them go build an app and try and replace some part of their work or do something complex and then have it fail, and that be okay. And be able to talk about that and then being able to bring that to you. The biggest failure mode I see, this is especially true in enterprises, but I've seen it in startups too, is when a project launches and it fails and we pretend like it didn't.
Yeah.
And then we keep running some failure.
Yeah.
And it's give them some expectations, give them some expectations for goals that you would like them to achieve, give them some autonomy, make sure that they can have transparent conversations with you. And as long as you have those things set up, you will see success. I think most people want stuff to work. And again, if your employees are just showing up because you pay their paycheck and they have no interest in their work, then that's a different problem altogether.
Yeah. We can have a different episode about that.
Yeah.
It strikes me, Max, as you're talking about that, like, I like to call it the posture of experimentation,
Yeah, that's great.
giving that space, and it is cultural and can be set up systematically to, even as a starting point, we like paused for a day of no meetings and really did this exploration. And I think people almost, some folks that I'm seeing in some of my organizations are like waiting for some expert to tell them the 6-step framework for AI enablement, and they're reading another paper and another, and I really think less is more here, to your point of, okay, let's pause. I would maybe start like on a dry erase board and be like, let's talk about the things that you do day to day, and then
Yeah.
start to pull apart, like you showed us with the 4 layers. And what if we could name those 4 layers and then grab one thing and try and explore, and reimagine and just see. That is what is so neat to me about the ease of access at this point. Like my son and I made an app with Claude the other night that has corgis playing soccer to do math problems. And he also said when we were working on it that he was struggling with the clocks, like reading the traditional clocks. I was like, you and me both, that's hard. So we added the little clocks in there because sometimes it's hard to like tell exactly where that big hand is. And he was practicing that. We made it in like 2 minutes. That is just an example of this kind of like spirit of play, I think, because then in my mind, when I was like working the next day, I was working on something where I'm recruiting some subject matter experts for a project I'm working on. Normally I'd have a little spreadsheet of who did I reach out to and when and all that. I was like, why am I doing it like this? So I built my own little dashboard in Claude that I am just talking back and forth to, Steph is going to meet on Monday. It's updating that. It's adding their background from LinkedIn. So I have it in my mind and like where the connection came from, who recommended this person. And it would be, just saving me some time to have it in this space. So
totally.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is your like response to that? Is that an approach that makes sense? Kind of the spirit of play, experimentation?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit on something that I really missed when we were talking about this earlier, that is something I draw on quite a bit and is important, which is like, and I talked about this in my leadership article, but it's also just something I use, which is like, demonstrating learning in the workplace is super important, I think, for leaders. It's important for everybody, but it's super important. And whether that's through play or whether that's through more formal means or something, but seeing a leader in an all company call get on and say, here's this thing that I figured out and I learned about is super important, and not just dictating that other people know about things. And it shows that you have flexibility, that you're thinking critically. It shows that learning is important as an organization, right? And it's funny you talk about that in parenting, because what you were showing your kid in that moment is like, hey, like, let's figure this out together, right? And in that moment of learning, you're also able to demonstrate competency, which is like very important for leaders. And as I argue in my piece, I think it's one of the most critical things in the AI era, because going back to, like you said, just in the business side of like, how do you get your employees to adopt AI? Start adopting AI yourself.
Yeah.
Like start showing competency, start learning about it. Don't tell other people to go do it. That's a little scary. I'll tell you that just like a fun little side quest here in the engineering world. When I was managing a much bigger team, I think sometimes they would get scared because I would show up and be able to resolve an incident or knew things better than they did. But I never thought about it in terms of like, oh, you're not as smart as me. I always thought about it as like, this is the moment for me to show you that I'm also competent.
Yeah.
And like, this is what that looks like. And it inspired the right people. They would like that. They would want to ask you questions. How do I do it? So that's like at a base level, but back in the AI part, I totally think you're right. Like demonstrating learning and making learning a thing that you value, like whether that's in your family or in your organization, is really important.
Yeah, Max, you're making me think about a concept that I love around learning agility. It's one of my favorite terms. I did a whole like cohort learning experience about this a couple months back because I recognized this skill set is so vital, like that we can be able to like learning. Let me back up. Like learning gets kind of a bad rep because we think of it like very educationally, very like sitting in rows or something like that. But I think what I'm meaning in the way I use the term learning agility is about this almost being ambidextrous, like being able to be flexible and like do different things and having T-shaped expertise where yes, you have depth, but you also have like a lot of breadth across different things. I was invited by an organization at one point. They were like, we want to build a culture of learning. And like, we spent a lot of time unpacking, what do you even mean by that? Like, what are the humans doing or not doing that you want them to do? You want a book club? Like, what is it? And it really was this like deeper organizational challenge that they were facing where leaders needed to be, leaders were afraid ultimately to show that they didn't know something because they thought they're supposed to be the experts. And in fact, that they realized that's what's holding us back from this posture of experimentation, whatever you want to call it, to start to explore and say, like, we don't know yet certain things, but we can figure them out. And I think that this is one of the things that could really shape like better meetings. Even technology is dynamically changing, that it's exponentially, shifting each day. There's this idea that we talked about of this probabilistic, we don't always know what it's going to do. And that feels weird. And so how we lead at this time really strikes me as if we're rigid and stuck in the way we've always done things, that's the group that's going to be in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. There's 2 points I want to just like jump in there on. One is just like a funny thing that I would challenge any leader to do, or any employee, anyone working on a project. Just don't share it with anyone. Get some transcripts. You're probably recording your meetings. You're probably transcribing them if you're using Google Meets or one of the other ones. Put those into Claude and ask Claude what happened in that meeting. And the reason is because it's gonna be able to tell you what was theater and what actually happened. And it's surprisingly good at that. And I've noticed this without any context from me, that it will be like, all of this stuff right here was theater, and then these actual decisions got made. And so that's just a challenge I would give to folks to just try out. On the learning side, though, too, like the most critical part there, I think, is curiosity. And I think about curiosity a lot because I'm a very curious person. I don't know how, but I've cultivated that. And the reason I mention curiosity specifically, like sort of in addition to the ecosystem of learning, is curiosity is the self-starter skill inside of there, right? Curiosity is the part that's like, I need to know more. Like, I just need more information. I need to understand what's right, what's wrong. I need to understand what's broken, what's not. And there's certain places that I've worked. I worked at Google for a little while. And at that time, which was in like 2013, I think, 2014, the way that company worked, and I don't know if it's like that now or not, it cultivated curiosity. And the way it did that was like anybody could ask anybody a question in the entire company. Nothing was off limits. You could walk up to the SVP of whatever and say, why are we doing this way? And they would tell you, and they would have a conversation with you about it. Again, that's not every company. But like going back like to that learning part, right? That's one of those like critical things where it's like you said, the reason that they're not learning, they don't see learning as a value. Like, you don't see you being curious as a leader. And also maybe there's like theater and no transparency, and people don't feel comfortable being curious because then they ask questions. People ask them why they're asking questions. They don't give them answers.
With all the things we've been talking about with AI and just, how quickly things are shifting, and how to be the human of the loop, what would you say if only people knew?
If only people knew how to be 5 years old again, and how to see the world not as something that they already know and understand, but as something they need to figure out.
Yeah, the power. I want to leave our listeners with that, really. How can you go out into the world you're working in and have kind of new eyes to see and explore and play, whatever term you want to use for that curiosity that Max has shared, and bring that to your work. I think that not only can lead to this better productivity and growth that you spoke about earlier, Max, but also, what if we enjoyed it while we did it? What if it was fun and didn't have to be so hard? Not to say that there's not, of course, like depth and challenge in any of our work, especially at this moment in time. But what if the way we approached it was from a lens of curiosity? I love that. Max, is there anything you want to share with our listeners that we haven't hit on? Where can people find you? We'll put all of the links in the show notes.
Yeah. humanoftheloop.com, which is my Substack, is probably the best way to find me. LinkedIn, obviously, and people feel free to reach out to me too. Like I'm excited to have one-on-one conversations. I don't need to be on a podcast. I can connect with folks, and I love ideas and talking about ideas. So happy to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Max. And just for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, we will be creating a blueprint for thought. We create those that go with each episode, and they allow us to take the ideas and concepts and kind of make them practical, bring them into our lives. And so if you're not already on our newsletter, which I write, by the way, then you can sign up for that in the episode description. So thanks so much for listening.